Continue to imagine the feeling. Something I'll repeat all the time is, the possibility for your future is greater than you can imagine. We often live in the reality that exists between our ears, which is finite, right? We have no idea what opportunities could show up, what phone call could happen, what opportunity could just present itself, right? So you really have to, and this is where meditation comes into play, learning how to witness the thoughts and the fear that are happening and imagining the success.
Hello and welcome to the Real Success Show. I'm your host, Candice Mama. If you have been wanting to get your wellness journey started in order to start pursuing your destiny, then today's guest is just for you. Mona Sharma is a health and wellness entrepreneur who's been featured on Red Table Talk alongside Jada Pinkett Smith. But before we jump into Mona, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that more people will find us. Now, without further ado, is Mona. Thank you so much for being on the Real Success Show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's so great to meet you finally.
It is so amazing to meet you. I've been so looking forward to this interview, and I know how busy you are. So I'm so grateful that you made time for us. But Mona, for people in our audience that may not know who you are, how do you describe yourself?
Yeah, I would say that I am a celebrity nutritionist and wellness advocate. I work a lot with my clients on prioritizing, food as medicine, but really understanding their biology. And then, of course, taking a very bio-individual approach in terms of how they can heal. I think that today a lot of people are lost in what to do. But if you honor your constitution and recognize that your perfect diet should be as unique as your thumbprint, then there's so much more freedom and enjoyment along the healing journey.
Oh, I love that every human being is individual and so should their dietary needs be. Oh, I love that.
Absolutely.
And so how did you start your journey? Were you always just a health bunny and you were like, this is what I'm going to do? Or was there something that occurred in your life?
So, yeah, my life about 10 years ago looked very different. I actually come from the corporate beauty world. I worked for a handful of luxury cosmetic companies like Christian Dior and Tom Ford. And at the time, it seemed like a dream job. I was able to travel the world and do makeup for fashion shows and work with celebrities and work on marketing campaigns and all of these things. And while it was a wow type of a job, it wasn't my wow. At that time, I suffered from a lot of anxiety. I had heart palpitations that put me on beta blocker medications. I was about 45 pounds heavier from the lifestyle that I was living. I was told at one point that I would have a really hard time having children because my PCOS was so bad. I stopped getting my menstrual cycle. And then I ended up having 2 heart surgeries for these debilitating palpitations that I had. And so it was during my second heart surgery. You're awake for the whole procedure. I saw my heart on a massive screen and, wires going everywhere. I was injected with a lot of adrenaline and stimulants to try to induce these palpitations that I knew would only happen if I was standing or moving. And when the doctor said, "Oh, Mona, great, we found where we need to do this ablation, but just so you know, there's a chance that you might have to wear a pacemaker for the rest of your life." And that was like, not even an option for me. And I knew that something had to change. I did not want to go through with this. And the irony of all of this is that I knew that there was a better way. So growing up, my father is Indian, my mom is Danish, and I've only ever known my mom to suffer from debilitating rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease. So her whole body is deformed from this disease. And my father, with his insight around Ayurveda, would take us to live at an ashram every summer. And then for those of you listening, ashrams are spiritual centers where you go and you practice food as medicine, doing yoga and mindfulness practices and meditation every day, living in nature, living in community, really turning down the noise and the impact of stress and inflammation to step into a happier way of being. So here I was as a little kid being forced to meditate at 5:30 in the morning, which felt like torture. I didn't get to go to like fun summer camps or anything like that. But, looking back, my parents had left me with the greatest blueprint possible. So that eventually, when I, got my fun, sexy job over with and lived that lifestyle, I knew what I had to do to heal. And that's when I threw in the towel in the corporate world and I went back to my roots this time to live at the ashram. They have locations all over the world, but I went to the one in the Bahamas and I became a yoga teacher and then a meditation teacher, not knowing that I was going to use this professionally, eventually a holistic nutritionist, and then eventually an NLP practitioner, which is neurolinguistic programming. And I've never looked back. And when I started to work with my clients right away, people would hire me to lose the weight, to get a six pack, to learn how to do, a crazy back bend or headstand. But ultimately, my clients would stay with me because I supported them in doing the same things that I needed, which was peeling back the layers of stress and anxiety and inflammation that allowed them to return to a sense of peace and happiness. And we now know that when you can do this for your mind, it manifests within the body, right? Like when we're feeling our best, we don't drive through a McDonald's drive-through, right? When we are feeling our best in our mind, then we do things that allow our bodies to feel great. And yeah, I've never looked back.
That is quite an experience. And I can't even imagine having to lay there looking at your heart being operated on. I mean, that
Yeah.
is such a big moment. But I love that you spoke about the fact that you lived this other life, right? That on paper, on Instagram, is an idealistic kind of lifestyle. Even
Yeah.
though you had this big health scare, were there any fears you faced about leaving the life you knew behind?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, my father's Indian and I didn't become a doctor or a lawyer, right? So what did I do? I went in the corporate world and it was in beauty, but I got to the top of my game really fast because in my mind and my culture and my generation, security for my future and success came with a consistent paycheck, working for a corporation, having a great job title on paper. But needless to say, it wasn't my passion, my life purpose. And I think that a lot of us, especially for my generation, we were too scared to look at any alternatives because it's this idea of having to start over, right? But I think that's what's really incredible today in this world of wellness and mental and spiritual growth. When we look at all of the big transformations that have happened, and I'm just like one of millions out there. There's so many transformational stories, but there's always a pivotal moment where you had to choose to continue with the consistency and not feeling great within your life, or taking a leap of faith, just having faith and trust that there had to be another way. The way that I describe it to my clients is like listening to the nudge. Sometimes we all expect like this really big sign or someone offering us like, here's the next job, here's the next solution, here's what you need to do. But it doesn't always work like that. You have to trust these little nudges. Like, it doesn't feel right being here, turning on your intuition. And a lot of our intuition today, I feel, is really compromised because we're so distracted by noise, constantly being busy, constantly looking at the perfect reels on social media, right? The highlight reels of all these other successful entrepreneurs that don't talk about what it was like when they were at their worst. So I think that there's tremendous power today, especially in an age when stress and anxiety are on the rise and people are suffering, for us to really honor, like, what, these paths that we thought were the end all be all, there's another way, and just trusting the direction that you have to go and then seeking out the resources to get there. you know um when I became a yoga teacher, I was constantly just like looking, well, what other people did this, what other people moved into this career, who do I want to mimic, who's the leader in the wellness world that I want to mimic just a little bit, right? And over the years, I think that I've taken just bits and pieces of a lot of people that I admire and gone along and created my own path.
That's incredible. And, there are a lot of people, as you mentioned, who are at that pivotal point where that nudge is in their soul. They know what they're doing is no longer fulfilling, but they always say to themselves, Mona, just if I have this much money, if I
Yeah.
just get to this point, if I just, wait for this perfect moment to transit and go into a different direction, then I'll
Yeah.
do it. Is there ever a perfect moment or a perfect amount before you take the jump?
It was funny. I was thinking about this yesterday. I have a very dear girlfriend. You have a great girlfriend who calls you on your stuff, right? And I've known her for a couple decades, and she would always criticize me. I always would be the person that would say, I just need this job and then I'll be happy. I just need to get to this, whatever, and I'll be happy. I just need this apartment, this car, and then I'll be happy. So, yeah, my happiness was dependent on these superficial success markers that had nothing to do with the sense of how I was feeling inside. And now that I'm in this profession that I love, I'll catch myself. I just need to get to this point. I just want my dream house. And then no. This is the journey. If we're not finding any joy in the day to day, we're never going to get to that moment where happiness is. We have to experience everything that we want to attract within our life right now. Otherwise, our day to day is going to be trapped in the symptoms that I work so often with my clients with. And, more than the bloated and digestive symptoms and weight gain, it's the lack of happiness, the lack of fulfillment in everyday life, the lack of satisfaction from every single day. It's like, gosh, if we're not even finding the joy in what we have access to every day, then what is living for, right? What are we pursuing? And I think that now we know from incredible spiritual leaders like Eckhart Tolle, it's really about finding these high vibrations. So happiness and joy and peace in the moment and what we're doing. And then all of a sudden we shift our vibration to become then a magnet for all of the things that we want to create.
Oh, that is so powerful. And the question then becomes, is it possible to find those states of joy, bliss, and happiness within environments that you still need to get out of? Or do you need to first transition out before you seek those states?
No, I would say that ultimately, before anything else, what I do is I support my clients in learning how to shift their vibration away from the stress and anxiety that are keeping them stuck in the emotions that they no longer want to feel, into achieving the vibration, the emotion that they want to step into. Because when you do that, you can go about life feeling a lot happier. And it's understanding that this is going to look different for everybody. So some very common practices every day is how you start your day. What is your morning ritual? Is your morning ritual dragging yourself out of bed to hit, the start button on the coffee machine and then dreading your first meeting? Is this your everyday? Or is your morning ritual actually getting up a little bit earlier, prioritizing your mindset with a guided visualization or a meditation practice, or even a walk outside and really visualizing into the life that you want to feel that day and setting an intention, right? We're not setting intentions for how we want our day to be, and then we expect everything to just work out. But if you live leading your life with intention, then you're more likely going to feel or attract the emotions and opportunities that you want to attract. So yeah, understand exactly what you need to shift your biology your vibration. For one of my clients, this is having, a bit of a dance party first thing in the morning. So for her and her kids, she'll turn up, a specific song or music that they'll have a dance party to. For other people, it's getting up at 5:30 and going outside for a walk to see the sunrise, right? But understand what it is for you that makes you shift your mindset so that you get to a point that you can say, oh, okay, that felt so much better. Now let's start the day.
Mm, I love that. And Mona, life happens to everyone, right? Even the highest, most vibrational human beings are going to experience people being mean-spirited to them, or, something not going their way, or accidents, or whatever it is. So when you are highly vibrational, you're in the frequency and things are happening, how do you tend to deal with it?
For me personally, I have to stop. I am a very empathetic person, and I think that we can all agree, especially after the past 2 years, life is really hard. There has been a lot of trauma and loss and death and war and anxiety and stress that is beyond anything that we've really ever dealt with before. And, it's so easy to get caught up in everything, especially if you're watching the news or media, to the point where you're spinning, like you're just stuck in this dread every day. But we know that if we're not going to become a creature of change, then we're just perpetuating those exact same things in the world. So for me, it often comes stopping. So this morning, for example, I wanted to do nothing except for have an extra coffee or two, just dive into work, screw my morning practice, forget about getting outside. But then I said, no, like if I start the day like this, then I'm going to spiral. The day is going to be done. I've done nothing for my self-care. So instead, I took my matcha latte with me out for a walk and I got some sun on my face, recognizing like, oh, if I'm aligning with the circadian rhythm of the earth, I'm actually boosting my body's serotonin, right? Your serotonin is your feel good hormone. And then all of a sudden, I left the house hunched over. And now I'm walking up a little bit taller. My mindset's up. I'm looking up at the sky instead of down on the ground. And so you can imagine the impact starting your day off from that note versus the, oh my gosh, I'm so busy, there's so much to do, right? You take that energy into every single part of your day. And as a mom, which this is the energy that we're also teaching our kids about, right? And we have to make sure that we're setting the tone within our households. And for a long time, I was just becoming a witness to the energy that I was creating in my home, and my kids working from home. Also, my kids would come home and also come into this energy, when it's really ultimately up to us to create the energy that we need in our spaces where we spend the most time.
All I heard you say is like personal responsibility, right? Personal accountability for the energy we create. Because I think sometimes it's so much easier to fall into the victim mindset and be like, Mona, you don't understand. Life is happening to me. I can't control the energy. I can't control my boss. I can't control this person. And it keeps coming at me. And so what I'm hearing you say is, when we change our vibrational frequency, then the life around us changes. Did I hear you correctly?
You got it, because we can absolutely all control the impact of life events or other people's energy or personalities on us, right? The perfect example of this is, exactly what happened during my heart surgeries. Our doctors, could they have done other things for me to help me heal at that time? 1000%. But our doctors today, unfortunately, do not have the training and understanding the power of nutrition. They didn't ask about what was happening in my life. They didn't ask about my fulfillment at the time, the heartache that I was going through, my lack of joy in my life. They weren't asking about these things. Doctors are trained to take a problem away. And, fortunately or unfortunately, that comes with a prescription drug or surgery. But in their mind, they were taking a problem and an imbalance away from me, right? Having the growth that I've done today, if I could go back in time, I could have said, okay, take ownership of how you're feeling, take ownership of what you're consuming and the foods and everything else that you're putting into your body, take ownership for how you're starting your day, take ownership for the direction, find somebody who motivates you. Who am I hanging around with that's like, sucking my energy versus the environment that I'm keeping that could possibly motivate or inspire me to grow or become better or become happier, right? So, yeah, ultimately, even with my clients today, I can coach them and guide them and show up every single week for an accountability call. But ultimately, if they're not going to make the decision to own it themselves, to move themselves into the number one position on the priority list, where we should all be, by the way, then nothing will change, right? And in order for something to change, we have to initiate the change. So yeah, it's absolutely on us.
That is powerful. And you started the conversation speaking about, your nutrition and how to like eat better and heal your body. So where do we begin? Do we start in the mind, body, or soul when we're starting to step into this purpose and journey?
Yeah, on my first call with my clients, I think everybody wants to walk away with a food plan. Mona, just tell me what to eat, and then, we'll see what happens. But you know what to eat. If I was to put two plates of food in front of you, one was a burger and fries and cheesecake, and the other one was like a really healthy piece of protein and, vibrational, high, colorful foods from the earth, you know what plate is healthier. The problem is, why aren't we choosing the healthier option for ourselves? Why do we get trapped in the thinking that we need the comfort, right? And part of it is because of food marketing, and our food today is heavily processed to be, higher in fat and sugar and salt than anything else in nature, which means that it's highly addictive. But if we're coming at it from a place of self-love, self-care, and compassion, then we're going to make the right option. So more often than not, my first call with my clients has to do with addressing your mindset. What is your mindset around your healing? What is your mindset around how you want to feel every single day? Have you even considered how you want to feel when you wake up every morning? Have you decided that, oh, in order for me to wake up feeling really happy and vibrationally really, really good and motivated every day, it's going to take nourishing my body with the right information. And that's what food is. Food is information. Every single thing that we digest is information that goes to every single cell within our body, but we don't think about it that way. We just think, oh my God, just throw it down the hatch and expect my body to deal with it. So I think that when you can really get in tune with what your why is for living healthy and happy, what the impact would be. So, for example, everything that you eat, that you consume today might not reflect in your body tomorrow, but it will certainly reflect in your body when you're 80s and 90s and 100 and beyond, right? All of our decisions today matter. So, how do you want to feel then? How do you want to feel when you get the dream job? How do you want to feel when you get the relationship of your life? How do you want to feel when you get married? How do you want to feel when you have kids and beyond? How do you want to feel when you embark on your new career path, right? You obviously, more likely than not, don't want to do it from a mind and body that feels tired, fatigued, and depleted. You want to do it from a body, mind, and spirit that feels empowered and overjoyed, where food can really be used as a tool to help you thrive. And for my lineage, growing up with Ayurveda, this kind of ancient Indian science, we digest everything. We digest what we eat. We digest what we smell. We digest what we watch. We digest what we listen to. And we digest what we feel. So ask yourself, what are you digesting? Are you digesting the right foods? Would you want a nutritionist to come over and look in your cupboards and look in your fridge? Because most foods that come from a box, right, it's dead food. It's lacking information that's going to serve vitality. What are you smelling in your house? Are they pleasant smells? And are there chemical fragrances? Are there toxic air purifiers and plug-in fragrances that are linked to cancer? What are you watching? Are you watching things that are fueling a life of vision and purpose and excitement? Or are you watching things that are like way too dramatic or stressful? Or are you waking up watching the news every day? What are you listening to, right? Is it music that has really happy lyrics, or, music that fuels you wanting to be happy? Or are you listening to some really sad music and really down podcasts, right? And then, of course, what do you feel? I always talk about this idea of creating your own ashram in the city. There's nothing unique at the ashram except it's a place that sets the stage. The foods are healing. The scents are natural. What you watch is pleasing. It's bright and it's colorful. The colors that you wear on your skin are also really bright and soothing. They're free of chemicals and stuff like that. So replicate all of these things. Look around you in your house and just ask yourself, is this fueling me and the version of myself that I want to create? Or is this depleting me and keeping me stuck in this version of myself that I'm ready to move on from?
Oh, and Mona, as you're speaking, the one question that came to mind is, as you said in the beginning, right? You can put two plates in front of someone, and we know intuitively what's good for us and what isn't. Everything you're saying makes so much sense, especially on a logical perspective. However, why is it that as human beings, we can know something, yet struggle to do it, even though we know it's going to be good for us in the long run?
I think it's addressing how you're feeling every day, right? Like I said before, when we think about this idea of fight or flight, which is our body's response to stress, we now know that a lot of disease or dis-ease within the body is caused by this word inflammation. Some inflammation is actually good for us. It causes a response that turns on our body's incredible healing powers, right? But when it's inflammation that is too far to one side, right, meaning too much of an inflammatory response, then that turns on dis-ease within our body, right? And so when I work with a lot of my clients today, I'm noticing that they're living with too much stress and anxiety, right? So back in the day, we would have called this fight or flight something that would happen when you would be running from a lion or a tiger, right? And as you're running from that lion or tiger, fighting for your survival, you would never say, oh, now's a good time to throw an apple in my mouth and start eating, right? We would never do that. Our bodies cannot digest food when we're under that much stress. But the thing is today is that most of us have gotten used to living with levels of stress that we've never lived with before. We're eating while we're watching social media. We're eating while we're doing work. We're eating while we're driving. We're eating when we're not even present. So are we going to make the right decisions? No, not at all. And I think this really goes back to setting the stage. You control with your dollar. Whenever you go grocery shopping or order food, ask yourself that guiding like question: is this going to fuel my health? Because if you don't buy it, then you won't have it to eat. And it becomes very, very conscious. And it's about creating a new ritual in your life that causes you to prioritize yourself. You're essentially becoming your own advocate or your own coach, right? A lot of my clients will say, like, if Mona was on my shoulder, like, what would she be saying to do? Right. So we all have to pretend we've got this wellness coach on our shoulder, just asking ourselves, because it's not about criticizing. There's no right or wrong. It's really, it's just going to manifest in how you're going to feel in this one life, in this one gorgeous, beautiful body that you have, that we can make the best out of, or we can make the decisions that cause us to suffer imbalance. And we don't want that. I think there's a call to end the suffering that's happening today.
Mm. And in today's, body positive movement that, has been pretty widely spread as to people needing to love their bodies as they are, do you feel like we are leaning way too much towards one side where we like, I just want to love myself the way I am, therefore I don't need to change it. And therefore it actually keeps us in a state of unhealthiness and dis-ease?
That's a good point. And I know it's a really touchy topic for a lot of people, because we obviously do want to love our bodies unconditionally. Like, our bodies are miracles. They're working for us every single second of every day. We've had a heartbeat that's been beating for us since we even arrived, before we arrived from our mother's womb, right? It's powerful. However, when we think about, the rise in obesity that's happening, the rise in diabetes and metabolic disorder, the rise in mental health issues that's happening amongst adults and children, it shows us fundamentally something is wrong. So now, with today's science, I love incorporating these ancient rituals, but with modern day science. So understand your biology. When you go to the doctor, which everybody should do at least once, if not twice a year, not because something's wrong, but your doctor should be your partner. Get your blood labs done. Get a full spectrum blood lab. If you can, get a stool test done. Understand what's happening within your stool, the bacteria and viruses that exist, if there's an imbalance of good and bad bacteria. You want to know these things so that you're making the right decisions. Because if you're somebody who has like the most body love and self-compassion, you're really owning it, but your inflammatory markers are through the roof, your blood sugar is leading you to become pre-diabetic, right? Your heart potentially is inflamed. Then that just says, okay, you've got to do some repair on your biology so that your self-love can really match a body that is thriving.
I love that. And I love the way you broke it down for us. And you also mentioned something about, listening to that nudge, which I wanted to go back to. And many people would call that intuition. So how do you define intuition as opposed to fear?
Yeah, I would say that for me, what led me off course, so far off course, is I never felt like I fit in. I never felt like I fit in. So I was always trying to live up to the success of somebody else, live up to the image of somebody else, chasing a goal that somebody else was achieving instead of tuning into my own sense of being. And I think that there's a really big area of an opportunity for us to even show our kids, what is it like to honor you? Like, to fall in love with the fact that nobody else on this planet is like you, and that you have come here with the most specific, unique, divine mission. If you can just trust yourself enough to go for it, right? But unfortunately, in today's world, especially with social media, we live in lack and comparison all the time. So I think that's why, especially now, these like ancient rituals are really making a comeback. And it's no longer woo-woo, right? Like, all these mindfulness practices are being backed by science. But again, it comes to us to take the ownership to do that. And so an exercise to your question that I often run with my clients is, imagine two doors. If you're trying to make a decision, if you're really trying to understand it, is it fear or is it motivation and inspiration? Think of the decision that you can make. Go down one door and imagine, what does it feel like? What does it look like? What is the impact of you making that decision, right? Come back, close the door, close your eyes, go through the other door, and then understand, okay, if you're making this from fear, what does that look like? What does it feel like? Will you feel accomplished? Will you feel proud? Will you feel a sense of growth from that? And then if the answer is no, then that's your answer right there.
Oh, That is a beautiful exercise. And I hope that everyone watching and listening will do it, and run through it and maybe even write it down so that they can really have it on paper and see it back, reflected back to them.
It's
And
really powerful. Yeah.
it is. And, you are running a really incredible business right now. And a lot of people, when it comes to the fear of failure, some
Mhm.
people actually fear success even more, especially when it comes to what is aligned with their purpose. So, for any person out there who's fearing their own success, where can they start to navigate that road?
Continue to imagine the feeling. Something I'll repeat all the time is, the possibility for your future is greater than you can imagine. We often live in the reality that exists between our ears, which is finite, right? We have no idea what opportunities could show up, what phone call could happen, what opportunity could just present itself, right? So you really have to, and this is where meditation comes into play, learning how to witness the thoughts and the fear that are happening and imagining the success. Again, what is it going to feel like when you step into the success of your business? And I think that if we can honor that more so than the fear, then we're always going to be held up or protected, right? And at best case scenario, I can definitely say, looking back over the past 5, 10, 15 years, all of these inflection points that have brought up fear of failure, fear of success, have always been either a breakdown or a breakthrough. And as hard as some of these moments have been for me, gosh, when even feelings of like guilt or shame or not feeling like I was enough, they always led me to a better version of myself that I wanted to become. Because then you decide, okay, well, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to show up in that way, which means that I have to move in this path. That feels better. This is the direction that I want to go. This is who I want to be. This is what I want things to look like. It really ultimately helps us make decisions.
Mm. And I'm so curious to know, especially that you're so far along in your journey, does the journey ever get easier?
The journey gets easier when you can learn to give yourself the greatest sense of compassion. Yeah, I think that anybody who is driven, especially, my gosh, this world of, living and becoming an entrepreneur is challenging. There's a lot of instability, there's a lot of unknown. But I think that when you really get clear on prioritizing the things that matter to you, when it comes to these pillars of health, so for example, prioritizing your health, prioritizing your mindset, prioritizing your friendships and your community, prioritizing what your purpose is, prioritizing your time in nature. Like when you're really prioritizing the things that you want to feel within this lifetime, then it gets easier. Will the challenges always arise? Yeah, 100%. But instead of looking at them as challenges, we have to understand that this is just part of the journey. In my 20s, I wanted to always just arrive. I'll be happy when. But now you recognize that some of the greatest gifts actually come through the challenges.
Mm. And you've mentioned community quite a few times throughout our conversation. So clearly,
Yeah.
community is something that's important to you and important in your life. How do people
Yeah.
start learning how to cultivate a good community?
Well, there's that saying, right? Like you are the sum of the 5 people that you hang out with. Ask yourself if those people are serving your vision and your happiness. Or those the people who want to go for a beer and pizza every single weekend, and yet what you spend most of your time doing is complaining about your weight and your depression. Then you really have to make the decisions and to make changes. And often those aren't easy, right? I've had to end specific relationships that just weren't serving who I was growing into. And the greatest gift for this honestly comes from the ashram. When you go to an ashram, there is community there. Everyone comes from a different background and they're on their own professional or even spiritual growth. And yet you sit together, it's called satsang, where you sit in community, where you sit and when you eat with other people at a table, you're not scrolling, you're in conversation. When you ask questions like, how are you? It's not about responding with, oh, I'm fine, or, oh, I'm so busy. It's, you know what, I'm going through something right now. And the dialogue that you can then have with somebody else when you can both come from it, from a position of being vulnerable, it's like that's when this connection happens. And we know that connection as human beings is so powerful. I'm sure a lot of us can agree, especially over the past 2.5 years, that was taken away I'm a hardcore introvert, and like me staying home was fine. But then when I would reconnect with people and like felt how great it was to just hug somebody and hold them and to have a dinner out somewhere or have an experience, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much magic and laughter that comes from that, right? And I think that we can ultimately be our best teachers, right? So when I say that the change starts from within with you, you can then go and be the person out in the world that inspires somebody else, that inspires somebody else. And then somebody else who's inspiring you is going to be reflected back at you, right? There's so much gift in community.
Oh, I love the word you just said. I think it's called satsang. Is
Satsang. Yeah.
satsang. I think that's such a beautiful word. And I know a big thing that happens in our community, and a big question we constantly get asked, and you mentioned it, is how do you release people with compassion from your life?
I often think that it doesn't have to be something that's so verbal, right? It doesn't have to be confrontational. I think that a simple, you know what, tonight I'm going to stay in because I'm choosing my mental health instead of going out to a bar for that, fast food or pizza or whatever it is. And then over time, I think it's something that happens organically between two people. And the other person might choose to live in the drama or live in creating a story. But if they choose to do that, then that shows you even more so that, you probably don't want to be the person that lives in drama anymore. You probably don't want to be the person who lives in creating these stories anymore. There's no story. It's being. And we have to honor the path that other people go on and really just trust that if you give that person space and if they come back to you, whether it's a relationship or a friendship, then it was meant to be.
Mm. And I'm so curious to know, have you ever experienced any part of your journey that has felt isolated or been alone within it?
Yeah, I'm definitely an introvert and I'm happy being on my own. I think that during some of my darkest times, I chose to be alone than with other people, which really just exemplified my state of suffering, right? It's so easy to live in this idea of woe is me, to label yourself as somebody who is sick, to label yourself as somebody who's going through something challenging. But we all know if you had the courage in those moments to look at other people's stories in your city, in your town, in this world who are suffering at so much of a greater scale, you would ultimately see that your level of suffering wasn't something that you could even compare it to, right? And don't get me wrong, a lot of my clients, including myself, it was my own version of my trauma, and whatever you experience, own as your personal trauma. But you also have to make the decision, am I going to continue to live in this trauma or move ahead, right? And so for me, I have an incredible big brother who, when I was sick, he was a big brother that always does marathons and try adventures, was always very active. And one year he asked me to join him, and I just said, no, I can't. Like, I've got this heart condition, right? And this is after my heart surgeries. And he just looked at me and he said, how's that working out for you? How's this label that you've given yourself working out for you? And it really hit me. And I just thought, oh my God, you're right. And so that was an impetus that caused me to change. I went and I sought out eating healthier. I went and I sought out, becoming a nutritionist. I sought out a personal trainer. I sought out a running coach to show me how to do it safely. And sure enough, that was the year that I ran and cycled and swam my first tri adventure with my brother.
I love that. And that is such a powerful question, right? Because I think sometimes when you are in the state of victimhood or woe is me, it can be so difficult to see your life from a bigger picture. It's so difficult to be like, yes, I hear Mona, I hear Mona's journey, but I think what then people tend to do is like, but that's Mona Sharma. She knows,
Yeah.
like, her life is different. She didn't go through the pain I went through. She didn't go through the trauma I went through, or whatever story we tell ourselves. And so when you
Yeah.
were re-narrating and rewriting your story and who you were, how long do you feel like that journey took you?
I recently, it was last week actually, I returned to the ashram that I grew up at, and they asked me to be a speaker, not knowing that I grew up there. And when I went back, I shared the story that there was this one strip of beach that I walked every single year, I would say for almost a decade, asking, who am I? What is my purpose? What am I meant to do? How can I serve? What is the job of my dreams? How do I get a relationship? What is my, financial freedom? And I journaled and journaled and journaled, not realizing now in retrospect, I look back, every single year I was going back a step closer to the version of myself that I was becoming because I was doing the work. And so, it's not that it happened after 10 years, it's that it was progressively happening a little bit each and every year that I went back. So as long as you're consistent with your practices, and you don't let yourself off the hook for what those practices are, I promise you, one day will come where you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, look at where I was 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ago compared to where I am now. And giving yourself some grace through that process. Growth and change is not easy. Changing your diet around is not easy. Adopting new healthy rituals like meditating today, it's not easy. But when you can turn a habit into a ritual, then all of a sudden it becomes you, right? Meditating, just like brushing your teeth, becomes you. Eating well becomes you. Exercising becomes you. Having positive conversations with friends instead of gossiping and complaining becomes you. And all of a sudden, you've grown into the person that you want to become.
I absolutely love that. And in your journey so far, who have been some of your most inspiring teachers that continue to help you to grow?
Yeah, I would say quite a few from different aspects. There's a lot of these swamis who are spiritual leaders from the ashram that I grew up at that are really involved in these Vedic texts that I think have to do just about living life. The Bhagavad Gita is a really great book that I highly recommend people look into. And then, of course, a lot of the incredible spiritual leaders that we have today. Reading Eckhart Tolle's books for the first time was incredible. Going to my very first Tony Robbins event years ago was very impactful. Looking at people like Jesse Itzler, who I get to work with today, who's just so successful in that world, was, a phenomenal inspiration, right? Oprah Winfrey, like just a lot of these really incredible spiritual leaders, or people who were, driven to overcome adversity and challenges within their life were my leaders. And I was a sponge. I got to a point where not a morning would go by where I wouldn't listen to a podcast from somebody new, or I wouldn't listen to, an educational program on any of the pillars of health that I've spoken to today. Yeah, those are just a handful.
Oh, I love that. And if tomorrow, somehow technology collapsed and everything you've ever spoken about was erased from history, what would you want to be remembered for? What's the one phrase or thing that you'd want people to associate with you?
I would say the key thing would be, honor your constitution and remember who you are. Honor your constitution and remember who you are. Because often when I do these visual exercises with my clients, if you can go back to a memory of yourself as a child when you were carefree before there were impressions of other people and drama and stories and life circumstances, positive or negative, that happened to you, you had this beautiful spirit. So if you imagine your childlike self out playing at a ground, think about like, what was he or she doing? How were they singing? Were they dancing? Were they playing? Were they singing? Were they wearing bright, beautiful colors? And that is your spirit. And that's the spirit that should continue to be part of you today amongst becoming an adult and the responsibilities that come today. So honor your spirit and remember who you are.
That is powerful and that is so impactful. I love this. I'm loving this conversation.
Me
And
too.
as you move through life, is that what you would say your motto is, or is there a saying or phrase that when you're going through difficulties or hard times, that phrase comes to mind?
100%. Yeah. Even when it comes down to my diet, look, I'm human. There are days where just this past weekend, my husband and I went out and we had a really great day and had, a glass of wine and we had some pizza and there were French fries and all these things. And it was fine. And I know that my constitution now can handle it. Because I'm healthy the majority of the time. But if I were to keep up with those behaviors, I would know, Mona, is this honoring your constitution? No. Is this taking you towards where you want to go and how you want to feel every day? No. So are you going to wake up and change tomorrow morning? Yes. right? So just that guiding light question, I can't express how important it is. Just ask yourself, is it serving the version of yourself that you want to become?
Is it serving the version of yourself that you want to become? That is an important question. And I hope people put it at the top of their journal so that they can script it and see every day. And, now that you are where you are on your journey, how do you describe real success to you?
Yeah, I think real success comes from, for me, anyways, living in active service. Ultimately, my mission here is to serve and help as many people as humanly possible. It fills my cup, it fills my mission and my vision. I think that we are here to help and serve each other. And when we don't, we feel a sense of lack or void. And then also to have fun. I've got this beverage brand. I never saw myself having a beverage brand, but it's something that's taken off because I trusted that nudge that I had. And we're going with the flow. We're seeing where it leads to. We're having fun along the way to see and watch it grow. And it feels pretty exciting.
Oh, do you want to tell us just a little bit more about your beverage brand?
Yeah, it's a company called Jicama. It's Xicama, and it's based on a superfood jicama, which is a prebiotic root vegetable. Jicama has been on my clients' meal plans for over a decade because it's a really great healthy swap for things like crackers and cookies and chips. And one day, my husband and I decided to juice it and saw nobody else was really doing anything with it. So we kept the conversation going, and we ended up launching at Coachella, which is a big music festival here, and we broke sales records. And about 2 months ago, we launched at a retail store here called Erewhon. And it's been a pretty fun journey. So now I get to wear a different hat also and become a student again, learning how to look out, meet with investors and grow a business plan and business strategy and how we want this to grow, and growing another company that's very different. So it feels exciting to be a student again.
Congratulations. And should anyone else around the world want it? Is it shipping, or do we have to fly over to you?
If you fly over here, you can definitely go in store. But if you go to jicamalife.com, then you'll be able to get it to yourself, to ship it.
Oh, I love that. And as we end the interview, what is one thing about Mona Sharma that we will not find on Google?
What a great question. What is one thing that you will find that you will not find on Google? Oh my gosh, there's so many. I would say that my happiest place perhaps is being with my children and my husband on a beach. I would say that my happiest place is also being at an ashram, chanting. Right? Which I think a couple of years ago I would have been embarrassed to show, but now that I recognize that it's a big part of my upbringing, I love owning that. So yeah, if you ever see me at a spiritual center or an ashram with the shawl over my head and chanting, maybe with the tambourine in my hand, that's my happy space.
I love that. Mona Sharma, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. It has been a pleasure.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Candice. I'm so happy we got this to work out.
Me too. Me too. I don't know about you, but that definitely inspired me to kickstart and boost up my wellness journey. Please comment below with what stood out for you. As always, it has been my greatest privilege to serve you, and I look forward to doing it again next week.